Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Ahau. Now I'm always intrigued by games set in actual history, so when I saw Ahau and read up a bit about it, I was really interested in trying it. It's set in the classical period of the Mayan dynasty, and it uses historically accurate illustrations. For me, that's a fascinating theme and fascinating idea. Now when I started to read the rulebook, I liked what I saw. You're going to choose where your leader goes and pick one of the pyramid tiles. Add a worker to a city, and you can call upon the god of that city. Then you either collect resources, build a building, or add to your pyramid. Now all of these are very good choices, but it sounded like it required a fair bit of forward planning. And you know what? That's something right up my alley. I was excited to get this one to the table and get it played. So will this game climb the steps of greatness, or will it just be left on the bottom step, gasping for breath? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and we'll come back with my final thoughts on Ahau. This is Ahau set up for 3 players, but I'm only showing you one player's pieces for this overview. Place the city hex randomly on their spaces, then randomly add production sites to their spots. If there are any left over, like in this 3-player game, place the remaining on the calendar track. Set aside the starting pyramids, remove any ones not for your player count, and place the rest in the bag. Randomly place 2 pyramid tiles in each region, face up. Shuffle the building tiles and deal 2 to their spots. Then randomly draw 1 building tile for each region, face up. The rest go into a draw pile. Randomly place 1 scoring tile on each temple, and place the Katoon marker in the uppermost spot of the Katoon track. Randomly draw roll cards face down equal to the number of players plus 1. All the resource tokens are placed off to one side, and each player takes their pieces of their color along with 1 player aboard. Their weapon tile goes on the lowest point on their track, and the player's might tokens are placed on the might track. The first player goes at the bottom, and the last player goes on top of the stack. Place the 5 starting resource cards along with the random starting pyramid, and beginning with the start player, each player will take 1 pair of reference card and pyramid. The reference card will also have your starting resources, so take those as well to start the game. The game is played over 3 Katoons, and each Katoon will have a variable number of rounds, but the end of the current Katoon is signaled by placing a production marker on the last space of the calendar track. During each turn during a round is split into 2 phases. The movement phase, which is all done simultaneously, and the action phase, which is done in area order. During the movement phase, there are 3 steps. First, every player will take 2 of their cards from their hand and place them face down. The one on the left side of the player board is the area you want to move your ruler to. The card on the right is the strength. The strength card will only come into play if there is a conflict. That is, 2 players or more go to the same destination. Once all cards have been placed, flip them over and resolve. If 2 or more players have picked the same destination card, then you resolve the conflict. Add up the right card plus the military strength. Whomever is the highest is the winner. The winner advances 1 space on the might track and gains the rewards depicted. The loser of the conflict gains 1 weapon on their player board, but has to move their ruler to an unoccupied area. They do gain a weapon, but during the worker placement phase, they cannot put a worker in a city adjacent to the area that they just lost the battle in. If there is a tie for the card plus weapons, you go to the might track. Whoever is highest there is the winner. Once all the players have a ruler in an area, they will take 1 of the pyramid tiles from their ruler's area. We then go into the action phase, which will go in ruler area order, starting with the lowest numbered area. When your area is triggered, you're going to place 1 of your workers in a city surrounding your ruler. If you are the first player to have a worker in all the cities around a particular area, you claim the building tile and build it for free. Each city is affiliated with a god, and therefore when you place a worker, you can summon the god associated with that city you just placed a worker in. Summoning a god is completely optional. If you do wish to summon that city's god, you'll count the number of pyramid tiles you have in your pyramid board, and you can also discard pyramid tiles from your reserve. That is, the ones that have not been placed in your pyramid yet, but those have to be discarded. If you summon a god whose pyramid tile you have on your pyramid, place a temple marker on the matching temple. You can only have 1 temple marker per temple. The strength of the action you perform with the god is equal to the sum of the matching pyramid tiles in your pyramid and the discarded matching tiles. When you summon a god, the colors of the tiles don't matter for the strength of the action, but often the colors are going to be used to dictate how the action is carried out. For example, if you summon the chief god, you'll pick 1 of the color tiles used to summon that god. Then you can take that color pyramid tiles from the board or draw from the bag equal to the strength. So if I had an action strength of 3, and I used a white, red, and purple pyramid to summon this god, I could pick the color white and take 3 white pyramid tiles from the board, or draw 3 from the bag, or any combination. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the gods, but just quickly summarize them. I mentioned the chief god, they allow you to get more pyramid tiles. The rain god allows you to get resources from a production site that matches one of the colors used to summon that god. The god of trade allows you to move a worker up to the action strength spaces and allows you to swap resources for another resource with each step. The sun god allows you to take back played cards into your hand equal to the summon strength. It also allows you to lay down a worker, which will count for a strength of 2 when doing the city majorities. And finally, the jaguar god. Remove one of your workers from a city adjacent to a production site, matching a discarded pyramid color tile, then gain 1 fame for each strength of the action. You can also move up to 1 space on the might track and get that reward for using the jaguar god. Now, after you've optionally summoned a god of the city where you placed your worker, you then have 2 options for that city. You can either produce or build a building. If you produce, you're going to pick one of the adjacent production sites and get as many resources of that type equal to the number of workers you have in the city. Then remove the production site and add it to the next empty space on the calendar track. Now, instead of producing, you could build in a city. And again, here you have 2 options. You can either build one of your pyramid tiles or build a building tile from the bottom row. To build a pyramid tile, take one of the tiles you have in your supply and add it to your pyramid. Each level of the pyramid will cost an increasing amount of different colored resources. Level 1 takes 1 of any resource, level 2 takes any 2 different resources, etc. Any tile must be fully supported by either the ground or previously placed pyramid tiles. Get any reward shown on the space that you built the pyramid tile on. Then you gain additional fame for each pyramid tile that is adjacent to it that is also the same color and or the same symbol. If you build a wild pyramid tile, place one of the used resources on that tile, and that tile is now that color permanently. One last thing about the pyramid. There's also a different symbol on here, which is the plus card symbol. The first one you cover up, you take all the roll cards that were set aside at the beginning of the game and choose one of them to add to your hand. It will give you another number and a special ability when played. You can only ever have one of these roll cards per game. Instead of building a pyramid tile, you can build one of the buildings at the bottom of the board by paying the appropriate resources and getting the bonus above that space. Either fame or reduce the cost of that building by 1 resource. You place the building tile on your player board and get that appropriate award. Most tiles give you an ongoing ability, but you can only ever have 5 at a time. If you ever get a 6th, you just replace one of the 5 you currently have. Once all players have done their actions in the city, discard both cards used during the movement phase. If you now have fewer than 2 cards in your hand, you redraw all your discarded cards. At the end of the round, replenish all the pyramid tiles on the board. Discard the leftmost building tile and shift and fill. If the Katoon celebration has been triggered, that is, there are enough production tiles on the calendar track, go to the Katoon celebration and score some points. Otherwise, start the next round with the movement phase. During the Katoon celebration, score each temple according to its scoring tile. Each temple awards fame based on the performance of all players, not just the ones with markers of the temple, but only players at the temple will score the points. So if we score a temple that says score 1 fame for every different color resource in a personal supply, and let's say there is a red and green player's marker at the temple, but tan has the most different resources, red and green would score for tan's resources even though tan is not at that temple. Once the temples have been scored, evaluate each city. Whoever has the most workers in a city scores 2 points. If there's a tie, all tie players get 1 point. Remember that a laid down worker counts as 2 here. Then check if the game has ended. If a player has completed their pyramid, or placed their last worker, or if there has already been 3 Katoons, then the game is over. Otherwise, move the Katoon marker down 1 spot and start the next round by removing all production sites and randomly placing them out again, and all players take back their temple scoring markers. At the end of the game, after the last Katoon celebration, the player with the most points is the winner. Now let's get back to see what I thought about Ahau. On to theme and components. First off, I love the theme and the details that they added to this game. I know very little about the ancient Mayan civilization, so it was a real pleasure to read all about it and the real-world counterparts in the additional book that they give you. It covers the areas, the buildings, the resources, and why they were important to the Mayans, and why you're collecting them in this game, along with the historical roles and rulers and their gods. They took all that information and tried to tie it into the game, and in terms of layout and the high-level thematic integration, they did a pretty good job. But it really doesn't tie that tightly to the game mechanisms. Understanding the thematic elements really doesn't help you understand the gameplay. Now for the components, I like them for the most part. I did have some usability issues, and that really comes down to their adherence to the theme. I feel everything looks gorgeous, but it can hamper the gameplay. The board is a bit too busy, and almost everyone I played with found it hard to differentiate the different gods. Now, having the scoring markers on top of the pyramids like this, it looks really nice, but again, it makes it harder to figure out which temple goes with which god. I do like that give you an option to, you can take this top part off and use like a 2D one, but either way, I would like to have something else that was a little more helpful to help differentiate the gods at a glance. Other than those minor usability issues, I quite like the rest of the components. I thought they did a really good job. On to the gameplay. Now I think this is going to be a game that kind of splits people. The game in and of itself is not overly difficult to understand what you're supposed to do, but there's a fair number of little rules that need to be remembered. And with the limited actions you have on your turn, it's often kind of working backwards from what you want to achieve. For example, I want to build a building and I need, let's say, 2 different resources. So I need to place a worker in this city so I can produce from the production tile that's beside it, which means I have to play this location card on this turn, and the next turn I need to be able to go here so I can place a worker here and collect resources from over there. Then the third turn I need to be able to place my worker anywhere just as long as I can have the option to build. So it's all that matter of this is my goal and how I'm going to get there, because you won't be able to do kind of one thing in one step. And then you throw in the gods and they add a whole other wrinkle. And they're the thing I like the most and least in the game at the same time. To summon a god, you have to place a worker in a city devoted to the god you want. Then you need the pyramid tiles either in your supply or on your pyramid for their strength. If it's on your pyramid, you can place one of your scoring markers on their associated temple. Then based on the tiles you discarded, most of the gods have you pick one of the colors from the discarded or used tiles for their action. And the tying of the god abilities, which are always the same from game to game, to the end of Cthulhu scoring, which does change from game to game, sometimes feels a bit too disconnected. The chief god allows you to get more tiles, but his scoring marker may not have anything to do with tiles. When I first played the game, the movement combat resolution phase seemed to be an unnecessary addition to the game. I know you need to move your ruler, and even then I'm not sure whether you really need to do that from round to round. But there are not many occurrences of conflicts even when I play it with 4 players. With less than 4 players, it almost never happened. And even when it did, it hardly threw somebody's plans out of whack. Maybe later on in the round, but it really doesn't have a big impact. I think there could have been maybe a less thematic but a cleaner way to do this piece of the game of, choosing those initial tiles and where you're going to be placing your people. There are many parts of this game I really enjoyed. I love the decisions I had to be making on moving anything forward. I take this turn to get a resource so I can maybe build a pyramid next turn. But look at that building that just came up. And, that would be so useful. Do I stick with my old plan or do I pivot? Almost every turn was like that. Do I want to use the god power this round? And if I do want to use the god, do I want to use it for its ability, or do I want to make sure that I get that end of round scoring on it? And when I go for pyramid tiles, do I go for the same god so I can maybe get some bonuses for the linking on the pyramid board? Or do I really need maybe to have a whole bunch of different gods on my pyramid? Now I also like the game arc in this one. I always find that the first Cthulhu goes pretty quick and you think, how am I going to be able to get anything done? But during the second and the first part of the third Cthulhu, you're able to string more and more things together, so players aren't really depleting those resource sites nearly as quickly as they are in the first Cthulhu. So it kind of stretches out, you definitely feel more powerful at the end of the game. I also enjoyed the multiple ways to end the game. The third Cthulhu happens more often than the others, but I've had multiple games that ended with a player placing out their last worker and everybody's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this was coming so quickly. Now I haven't seen a complete pyramid finish the game, but I have seen it pretty close to having the pyramid finish off the game. But ultimately, would I recommend this game? I would. I enjoy this one. It offers a few different mechanisms and go towards making what I felt was an enjoyable game. Now I really love the look and the history kind of built into this game. Usability issues aside, I enjoyed the main mechanisms, the playing of the cards and trying to read what you think your opponents are going to do. I would like more of that, but I did enjoy that. I enjoy that the game feels tight, games where you need to be planning in some detail several moves ahead. I want that building, which means I kind of need these resources, which means over the next 3 turns I need to go here and play this card and then go here and play this card, etc., etc. To me, I really enjoyed that. I like the level of player interaction in this game. There is some for competing with areas, but even if you lose, you do get something. The competing for those Cthulhu scoring tracks as the first ones gives you extra points is something that I enjoyed as well. I enjoyed that there are multiple ways to end the game, so players can somewhat control how quickly that game happens. I also had fun with the game arc. The first round definitely felt different than the third, and I liked that by the end of the third I was I had a lot of powers and my character felt very strong. Unfortunately, as much as I like the look of the game, it did seem to be a form over function game. I do think some of the mechanisms could have been trimmed or worked a bit more to make the gameplay more smooth. The game also seems to be putting a lot of mechanisms together, play all your cards before you draw them back, combat resolution, worker placement, set collection with those pyramid tiles. But it really doesn't bring anything new to the table. Now, not every game needs to have something, brand new in the game. But when you have kind of stuff stick together, you really want to make sure that this game fully flows. And I think that's where this game is let down a little bit. Overall, though, I am going to give this game a 7.5 out of 10 in the Dice Tower seal of approval. Now, my scoring varied from 7 to an 8 each time I played and got to think about it a little more, so I'm basically going to split the difference and say 7.5. There is nothing in this game that I can point to say, oh, I really didn't like this piece. But the whole game feels like it needs just like a good polishing to get rid of those rough corners. Now, some people are definitely going to be put off by that roughness, and I completely understand that. But for me, the game just clicked. And that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.